This episode is brought to you by IT Pro TV, binge-worthy learning for IT teams. Why is it binge-worthy? It's learning presented in an engaging and entertaining talk show format that beats voice-over PowerPoint snooze fests. IT Pro TV offers an on-demand course library with more than 3,300 hours of content. Watch on your desktop, on the go, or in the comfort of your own living room. IT Pro TV is IT training you and your team actually want to watch, which means a better return on your learning investment. Get started with IT Pro TV for Teams with a special offer for Security Weekly listeners. Visit itpro.tv/Security Weekly to start a 7-day free trial and get 30% off a standard or premium IT Pro TV membership using the code SECWeekly30. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame, automate the hunt.
And I got busted using my phone. We're back! And this time with a totally awesome tech segment from Mr. John Strand, talking about critical security control resources. Oh, John. Critical security controls? Really?
I know, right?
I know, right? But this shit's important.
Compliance, and it sucks.
Oh, God. John.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Unfortunately, yes. I mean, yes.
So why I wanted to talk about this segment is, well, there's two reasons. One, I want to talk about this segment, but I also wanted to leverage and step into the segment I'm going to do for the next time I'm on Security Weekly, which is Mitre Caldera. And the reason why I brought up critical security controls is I had 3 calls this week so far where I'm talking with various customers, either through IANS or BHIS, and they brought up like, oh, well, you know, we're starting to do compliance. We're going to do ISO certification. It's like, oh, wow, that's insane. Or they say, well, we're going to start doing NIST 853 and try to get certified with that and get all compliant with that. And I oftentimes have to back up. We've been doing, Larry, when did we start doing critical security controls at SANS? I think it was like 2012, 2013.
Something like that, yeah.
Alan started walking around, and it was kind of funny when you talk to Alan Poller about things. Initially, I thought he was joking. He goes, you know, there's a problem in computer security in the fact that there's all these different audit frameworks out there. You've got NSA, you've got these various SNAC guides, you've got the NIST standards, then you have the new ISO standards, and he's going through all these different compliance standards. And then he says, and I think what we need to do is I think we need to create another audit standard. And I thought it was a joke, right? Like, that's the solution. We're going to create yet another audit and compliance framework. And it wasn't a joke. And it kind of became this game of hot potato where we're passing it around. Like, it was Eric Cole, Ed Scotus. They tried talking to me a little bit, and I'm half cocked and crazy. So they're like, we're taking the potato back. And it got passed around, and it landed in probably the best hands it could have. It landed in the hands of James Taralla and Kelly Taralla. And they just took it and they ran with it, and it's been beautiful. It's absolutely amazing. And the goal of this tech segment is I wanted to walk through some of the resources that James and Kelly have available for free at no cost whatsoever for people to use as far as trying to set up audit and compliance, and explain why this is actually important. So the first thing, whenever you're talking about the critical security controls, the reason why they were created initially was there was a lot of audit frameworks that came up with these different audit requirements, like any application that is created will actually use secure spin locks, CFMORs, and secure object reuse. And what the hell does that mean, right? You're like, this makes no sense whatsoever. And it basically was something from the old Orange Book T6 series, dealing with memory allocation that has been long since taken care of with, malloc and free and all of these different Morecore and all these different libraries for memory management in C. But because it came out in an audit framework in the 80s, it keeps on carrying forth in audit standards moving forward. So the idea was, if we're going to have a compliance standard in the critical controls, we needed to make sure that it was actually mapped over to actually stopping a real attack. Is it something that would be effective? So that's where people like Ed Scotus really came in very heavily into the framework, because with his background of offensive techniques, and they asked me for some input as well, and basically being able to say, like, all this crap that you're talking about trying to implement in an organization and some of the other audit frameworks don't mean anything. Like Larry, Joff, you guys remember like the DISA gold disks and these secure configuration baselines for operating systems, whether or not it was Linux or Windows. And you had people that were like, well, we got to create a secure image for Windows. And that made sense in like 1999, 1997, like in that time frame, moving up to about 2001, 2003, you had a lot of insecure misconfigurations, and everyone was trying to come up with these standards to harden operating systems.
And John,
garbage.
they took
Yeah,
some of that hardening so far that it made the operating systems unusable.
Yes, that's right. With the DISA standard, good point. They actually had the button remediate selected vulnerabilities. And if you selected that button, it actually turned your entire system into a boat anchor instantaneously. But that goes back to where security goes off the rails. And if you look at a lot of the problems that we have in security today, where people don't trust security, a lot of that comes from that crap, where we're trying to implement audit standards that make no sense to anybody at all, because we honestly, in the industry, a lot of times don't know what they mean. So when it was created, we came up with the 20 critical controls, the 20 areas that you needed to focus on, broke it down to actionable things that you can do easily in your organization. And then, like I said, Kelly and James at Enclave have just done such a fantastic job. We should be giving them all the money in the world that you're paying all of your other audit consultants that come in and try to do an audit in your organization. Let me show you what they got. All right.
And
so
John, I see that you're now using your Uber Lead hacking tool, one of my favorites,
Excel.
Microsoft Excel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's in Microsoft Excel. I'm trying to figure out if I can get a bash prompt in PowerPoint. I'm sure that my hacking acumen would increase tenfold if I could just do that. So
this is the next most popular programming language, Excel.
Excel, yeah.
The first is Stack Overflow.
And this, nothing but that's getting into copy and paste at that point. So speaking of like cool Excel things, they did an amazing job on this. All right. So I've seen tools that do audit compliance, and they cost a lot of money, and they aren't nearly as effective as this simple Excel spreadsheet is. So on this first screen, you get your overall score, right? And your score is basically like from a 0 to whether or not you get 5. And anytime we've ever done an audit, and I talked to James and Kelly about this, very rarely do organizations get over a 2 on their first try. But you can give them this kind of this overall kind of pie chart to management about the overall health of an organization. And across the bottom, you have a number of different tabs. Critical security control number 1. If you select that, it says inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices. And then it has a whole bunch of the actual critical security control details, right? So you say, okay, deploy an automated asset inventory discovery tool and use it to build preliminary inventory of systems. Okay, if you have an automatic asset inventory system that's in place and you have a policy, you can go over here to that cell in Excel, in the Excel spreadsheet. Say, yeah, we've got an approved written policy and the control is implemented. And we have it implemented on all systems. And if you notice, as I'm going through and saying that this particular part of this control is successfully implemented, the little round ring, the little ring at the top, is turning from red, slowly turning over to green. So it's overall tracking your status for this particular policy grouping, right? And it also, if I go back to the main tab, to the dashboard, it actually shows you that you're going to see some little small percentages now, 0.02 policies completed and controls implemented. So as you go through and implement these, it gives you an overall dashboard that shows you your overall adherence to that particular control and all the other controls as it relates. And all the controls are here. So you can go through and ask yourself, do we have these controls in place? And you can just basically say, yes, we do. And then it creates that wonderful heads-up dashboard that you can provide to management. You can show them where you're actually deficient. So this makes the whole concept of tracking this a lot easier to do. It also makes it a lot cheaper than a lot of the tools that are out there. And to be honest, this particular tool is far better than a lot of the commercial tools that I've seen over the past few years that try to do audit mapping, governance mapping as well. So this is an amazing spreadsheet for your organization to use for audit and compliance, and it basically is all killer, no filler. Now, a couple of quick notes on this. So there's times where you have people that try to interpret the control as something that's going to require $1 million software package. Now, some of them are very expensive. Whenever you're talking about things like data loss prevention, yeah, that can get crazy. Or if you're doing application whitelisting on the endpoint and you have to roll out Carbon Black to every single endpoint, yeah, that gets pricey. But the vast majority of the controls are actually fairly easy to implement. There's a lot of tools out there that can help. Like, for example, I'm just going to choose critical security control number 1. That's going asset inventory to identify different systems and hosts on your network. Well, that's actually pretty straightforward to do. If you're running something like Bro on the edge of your environment, it actually does a whole bunch of inventory of software and IP addresses on what's leaving your environment via egress. You don't have to go through and scan absolutely everything. And for the systems that you do know, if you're running something like SCCM, and you're actually tracking that information, well, congratulations. You're probably in compliance with a bunch of parts of doing software inventory, especially at the endpoints of your environment. So there's a lot of ways to actually go about trying to get compliant with these different framework objectives without having to spend a tremendous amount of money to do that. So if you ever get stuck, and I'll just kind of open this up because I have people that email me the questions on this all the time. If you ever get stuck on a control and you're like, this looks like this is going to be $1 million, shoot me an email, pick up the phone, call me. And I'd be happy to kind of explain some kind of cheap, like cost-effective ways of trying to implement some of these. All right, the next one I wanted to show you guys, I think, is probably my favorite one. This is the master mapping tool. All right, now the reason why the master mapping tool is so powerful is it's almost like a Rosetta Stone for audit and compliance framework mapping. And that's one of the reasons why I jumped on this for a tech segment for this week, is we had some customers like, oh, we're pulling out our hair. We have to be NIST compliant, and then we have to be ISO compliant, and then we have to be compliant with PCI. And, oh, we're planning on starting to do work in Europe, and we've got to do all kinds of other frameworks, and it's just insane, right? And what they put together, I don't know how many interns they lost in the dark coal mines making this particular spreadsheet happen.
All of them.
All of them. But they took every single one of the controls in the critical security controls, and they cross-referenced them with every single audit framework that you can think of. So like the NIST 853 Rev 4, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, NIST SMB Guide, DHS Guide, ISO standards, IEC standards. The standards in here that I didn't even know that they existed. The NSA guides, Australian guides, the NSA Top 10, GCQ, Cyber Essentials, PCI DSS 3.2, 3.1, 3.0. Because remember, guys, there's a lot of times that organizations have to be compliant with both PCI 3.2 and also 3.0 because the world is a hateful, hurtful place. HIPAA, FFIEC.
I've been there.
You have all of these COBIT frameworks, right? Freaking COBIT frameworks in here. And some of these you have to actually pay money to even get access to the guide, but they've already cross-referenced it. Hey, you're in Saudi? Congratulations. They got a cross-reference to Saudi. NERC SIP, that's in here, all the different versions for NERC SIP, Cloud Security Alliance, and so on. So this makes it a Rosetta Stone, and it makes it kind of one-stop shopping where you can now say, okay, we're going to focus on the critical security controls, and then we're automatically going to be cross-mapped and cross-referenced to all of these other control frameworks that are out there. And this is one of the reasons why, well, I guess just one of the reasons why, historically, up until we hired Darren and I think David and Sala were willing to do some audit control framework stuff, I was doing all of the audit framework work for BHIS for a long time. In fact, I remember giving some to Joff, and after he got through with it, he said, if you ever make me do that again, I'm quitting. So I realized that we probably should probably not have Joff doing audit framework stuff.
I really said that? I don't think I remember saying that.
Yeah, you did. You did. But it was the gig right after that you actually found the VPN zero day in their crypto libraries. So I figured that was your way of saying to me, don't ever make me do that again, because there's other things I can be doing.
Well, that's entirely likely.
It is, right? So the reason why I like to do this is we have customers that they say, well, you're going to do the pen test, and every single finding that you have has to be cross-referenced to the NIST 853. And I'm like, done. That's easy. That takes me like an hour for the report to do. And they're always kind of shocked. But whenever I use the Rosetta Stone, it is very easy for me to actually do that cross-reference. So for this, it can make you look like an information security rock star in your organization. You can go through and you can generate really pretty pie charts that you can show management where your actual compliance adherence is with a framework. And then whenever they say, well, sure, that's the critical security controls, but what about ISO? You can be like, excellent question. I've actually done full cross mapping for the ISO framework as well. And that's the type of rock star stuff that you need to do in security as a information security professional. Not someone that's just going to say, hey, I need you, systems administrator, to fill all of this out for our information systems monitoring so I can put this together. That makes you look like a jackass. But if you can knock the vast majority of that work out on your own, you can automatically do the cross-referencing, and you can provide visibility up to management, well, guess what? You're now an information security superhero. And all of this is free, and all of this is basically thanks to James and Kelly Tarala. Now, I'm going to kind of talk about frameworks this week, and then tomorrow I'm going to get a little bit more technical, giving you guys a little bit of a preview. I think I'm going to be here next week. But I'm going to talk about Mitre. Larry, you and I have had long conversations about the Mitre attack technique matrix and just how wicked freaking cool this is. Not the actual going through and identifying the groups, because who gives a rat's ass about the different groups? I mean, they have them over here. Like if I go to my screen, I love the names that they come up with some of these. They break down the different groups, the APT groups. They have all the numbered APTs, and then you're going to get into the pandas here in a second. And then they have awesome names like Charming Kitten, the Bronze Butler. Then you had Charming Kitten, but now you have the Copy Kittens, Dark Hotel, Deep Panda, Dragon OK, and Dragonfly, Dust Storm, the Equation Group, the Fin groups. And I think that's absolute complete garbage, and we can get into that in a different show. But the techniques matrix.
Well, clearly they're not a threat actor unless they have a really cool group, just like it's not a really good vulnerability until they have a theme song.
One of these days, yeah, they're
going to have a theme song and a logo.
You got to have a theme song and a logo, right? And one of these days, Larry, for Christmas, I want to get InGuardians on here. Because I think that would be awesome if we could get like a trusted sec and Guardians, a BHIS in here as like, this is actually a threat actor, and these are the techniques they use. And I kind of freaked out. It wasn't from Mitre, but one of the threat intelligence feeds that I was reading, and I'm glad I didn't get a chance to go off on threat intelligence feeds, but I'm going to do it now because what the hell. I noticed that they were doing this write-up of threat actors, and I can't remember what APT numbered group it was. And it said tools used by this threat actor group, and they said ping. I'm like, oh, well, clearly any bad guy that uses ping is in APT 52, I suppose.
Absolutely.
I'm apparently APT 52 today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Every day.
Totally owned
it. So with this, I love the technique matrix because whenever we're doing pen tests, guys, it's kind of like Legos, right? You assemble a bunch of these different techniques to actually match the organization that you're testing, and it changes in every single assessment, right? Like you may be using DLL hijacking to get malware to execute. I know that Joff has done a lot of really cool work with using weird ways to get things to execute a lot of the work of Casey Smith sub-T. And you may use that, but if you're trying to hide something, you may use application shimming with the application compatibility toolkit and SDB INST to actually hide on the computer system if that's part of what your actual statement of work requires you to do. But the thing about this is it's growing, right? It's not growing as fast as the threat actors list, but the different techniques that are out there that are being used and the categories of the techniques are constantly expanding. Well, Mitre has a tool called Caldera, which is awesome. And you've got to see the video to believe it. What Caldera does is you install a series of agents on a whole bunch of systems in your environment. And then you have the centralized Caldera server. The agents that communicate back into the Caldera server. And then the Caldera server then programs these agents or sends commands to these agents to execute commands within the technique matrix, the ones that are actually applicable that they can run. And it automates all of this. So what you can do is you can see which techniques work. And more importantly, you can go back to your monitoring and detection capabilities to see which of these different techniques were actually detected in your organization. So these frameworks have a tremendous amount of value, whether it's the critical security controls for audit compliance, or if you're looking at like a framework like the Mitre attack framework, and then the tools that they've released like Caldera to automate that type of assessment within a framework. There's a lot of really cool things available to us as security professionals to have a little bit more visibility into our own networks and also what bad guys are doing as well. So with that, I'm going to shut up, pass it over to the crew. Do you guys have any questions, comments, issues, concerns, filthy limericks? We'll take them all.
So there once was a man from Nantucket. Wait.
For the Excel spreadsheet, who in an organization would normally be tasked with completing that, or what team would be tasked with completing that? Because, I mean, looking at you pinged off quite a number there in the demo, and it's like you moved the bar 0.3%. So I can imagine that's quite the lengthy, undertaking.
It does. It does take a long time for many organizations. Whenever we do this, it can take like a week on like a medium to small sized organization, and much longer for larger organizations. And many times with larger organizations, you have to break it up into separate spreadsheets for different parts of the organization. But whenever you're talking about that initial setup, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using, because you're ultimately going to have to go through that initial setup regardless of how you're approaching it. And the vast majority of organizations today are using their own spreadsheets, and they're not cross-referenced, and they're not adhering to a standard, and they don't generate really pretty pie and bar graphs to demonstrate your compliance to executive management. So yes, it does take a while. Usually when I sit down with an organization, if I have the right people in the room, I can knock out a good chunk of the sheet in about 3 to 4 hours. And if you get everyone together, it's a great way to try to go through it. But yes, it does take a while. This is something that should be owned by the security team or audit compliance. And, it's just something that you keep up to date.
Just to add on to what John says, the follow-on is when you go through this as either an internal team or as a consultancy, what you end up with is almost like a 5-year planning document, which has incredible value for the target organization. Because you're building essentially a gap analysis that you can move forward and then grow upon, which is, it's very, very tactical, and it really means a heck of a lot to those people that we've done it for.
Yeah, and I really like you brought up that kind of 5-year plan or that 2-year plan, where you do this for an organization, or your organization does it internally. You now have a gap. And that's really kind of the tying theme between when we're talking about the critical security control spreadsheet that James Tralla and Kelly Tralla from Enclave have put together, and we're talking about Mitre, is rather than playing this information security magical unicorn game where you don't know really what attackers can do, you're constantly thinking, well, they might find a vulnerability in this particular server, and then they can pivot to another vulnerability in that server, and then there's vulnerabilities everywhere because the attacker is now a boogeyman, and you don't know what they're capable of, so you start panicking and spending a lot of money on things that don't matter, like threat intelligence feeds and data loss prevention. Both of those I think are actually in the security controls, but I didn't put them there. But the whole point of all of that is that gap analysis, being able to identify what are the areas that you need to implement in your organization and what types of attack techniques, going back to the Mitre attack framework, are you actually able to detect? And these two things start to go together very, very, very well. They gel with you saying, yes, we can detect all of these things. Yes, we have this capability of visibility on our endpoints. And then you can automate that test with something like Caldera. Great. Now you're actually testing where the rubber meets the road, and that's fantastic.
Well, and John, how many times have we gone into an organization and discovered that they've implemented some really, really fancy endpoint technology like a carbon black or a Cylance or one of those, and then we've gone back through the audit framework like this, and we've discovered they have big gaps in the first 5 controls, which is sort of the 101 of this framework, and that's sort of the cart before the horse, right? I mean, you have to back up and get your fundamentals straight.
Well, and it's funny you talk about that. I want to rope Larry into this as well. A lot of times when you're doing an assessment, they say we have all of this awesome security technology, and when you're testing, Larry, how often do you find out that they have it installed in like a handful of systems, but as soon as you get off those systems, it's not installed or monitored across the entire organization?
Quite often. And some of the times, even when it is installed, we'll find that their mean time to detection is not nearly as short as it should be.
Yeah, and I think that's an absolutely fantastic point. Like with a lot of these products, like Job mentioned Carbon Black, which I love. I think it's a great product.
Heck yeah.
But a lot of organizations don't spend enough time tuning that product and monitoring. They don't scale the security team proportionally with the amount of effort it takes to run Carbon Black. And they get like 4,000 alerts a day. And yeah, Carbon Black may have detected what we did, but no one's doing a damn thing about it.
Yep.
Well, and I think more to the point, if they had their 101 baseline in place, they would get more value out of just that discipline than they would out of the fancy product that they've implemented. It's a matter of sequencing and maturity.
Oh, and I think that's such a good point. And what sucks is I don't think the current iteration of the controls and the framework, they have the first 5 for the core, and that's there. But once you get into the individual controls, like if you're talking anti-malware protection, what are the core things you should do? What are the advanced things you should do? And not just within that vertical, but as it relates to other things. So, Joff, like to your point, we have customers that are like, yeah, we're going to implement Cylance or Carbon Black or Endgame or any of these products in our environment. And a lot of times we'll ask them, do you guys actually have host-based firewalls enabled to stop lateral movement on your workstations? And they're like, well, no. Have you started looking at like behavioral analytics or something like CyberArk for account management? Well, no. See, there's a lot of other things you can do that'll get you positioned to be in a much better place and reduce the overall noise from something like an endpoint security solution. Like just turning on the firewall so workstations can't talk to each other. That really reduces the noise of what you're dealing with. But yeah, that type of sequencing and saying these things you can do now relatively easily with current tool sets that you have before you actually start implementing some of the more important and not more important, but the more expensive things.
Yeah, I like to think of that as maturity sequencing, right? It's very tempting for a lot of customers to go for the sexy new technologies, and I don't blame them for trying to do that. But maturity sequencing is important. I mean, you don't want people to waste their money, and if you jump to the end goal without actually going through the 101 stuff, you really are wasting your money.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, how much are they actually investing on the people? How many times have we seen that they don't provide the proper training only on the basics of even system administration, and many times they spend several hundreds of thousands of dollars in the tool, and when you look at that purchase order, you don't see one single light item inside of there that actually mentions training for the very expensive tool that they just bought.
And the training is interesting, but I've seen organizations more than willing to spend like $500,000 on a security product, or sometimes a lot more money, $500,000 on a security product. But whenever it comes to like hiring another person with the skill set, they're like, ooh, yeah, we can't hire people. We can buy tools. We can buy tools with a single pane of glass and all of that. But training or investing in people and increasing the number of bodies, no. We're buying tools to replace security people. Mm-hmm. We don't want to buy tools to enable security people.
And John, very often those come out of two different types of budget. Capital expense versus an operating expense, and those budgets don't necessarily equal each other all the time. So the the people budget is the operational, and you want to keep your operating costs down, but your capital budget, we can buy all sorts of fun stuff.
It's December 1st, and we have to spend $2.6 million. Let's go.
Yeah. No, that is a very, very true factor, right? There's this tendency, and boy, I lived it for a long time because I worked state government for years, but there is a tendency in the fiscal cycles to get towards the end of the cycle, whether it's November, December in the corporate space, or whether it's sort of April, May in the EDU space, and people want to like just flush their budgets, right? And capital expenditure is an easy way to do that, but it's not necessarily the smartest and most logical way to do that.
The irony is too, like, imagine how many different products that people buy today that are annual renewal, right? Like, it might be a capital expense, but you're spending on it annually, so it might as well be operational.
I wonder how many organizations are like paying for security products that they haven't used in like half a decade. It's just automatically charging their credit card.
And not only that, just use the tools that are there in the environment. We talk a lot when we talk about hacking, about living off the land, but how about defending the land that we have with what we have? How many times do we see, as you mentioned, no host firewall? How many times do we see them? Hey, do you use WEF, Windows 7 forwarding? It's there. Why are you investing so much money on this other stuff when you have already this in the system? And many times it's just, hey, if you invest on your people in the correct manner, not that you buy them any training that they want, but you actually go out and say, okay, we want to build this skill set because we are here and we want to get to over here, and you spend the money correctly in that training. Many times, as you mentioned, in the case of using Bro, hey, Bro will pay for itself tenfold and you will save a lot of money instead of buying other products. If you, and many times it will give you a foundation to then choose the correct product that you want to bring in to fill some gaps and save you a lot of money. It is just being smart about what you do, just like you do it in business. How am I going to invest? I have a 5-year plan of how are we going to take the product, or how are we going to do in sales and stuff like that. Do the same with people. Where are we right now? Where do we want to be in the future? And we want this asset of the company, because the people are an asset to take me. Where do we want to take that asset?
This
So
is
you
really
talked
good one.
about. Oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, John. Talking about some of this is reminds me. I'm working on a talk that is a little bit different for me, but it's intended for a different group. It's intended for some management folks and targeting some very specific types of areas. You talk audit and those types of things. And the working talk title is everything I learned about IT security and its defenses, I learned from steampunk.
No, that
keeping it simple technologies can turn something really sexy and be incredibly effective and build relationships.
Less is more. There's another way of saying that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sounds like that would be a fantastic Wild West Hack and Fest talk.
Maybe.
I'm just
Less is more.
Probably respond to that email I sent you.
Yeah, you heard it. You heard it here. We're going to do a talk. Okay. I might even volunteer for this. You heard it here. We're going to do a talk. Somebody is called Less is More.
That'll be me. I'll submit that too.
So
I've got another one for you too, John.
Doesn't some of that get to expertise as well, right? So like there's only so much time you have to focus on learning so many things, right? Like for me, one of my New Year's resolutions was say no to more things, because quite frankly, there's only so much that I can learn as an individual to increase my value and my skill sets overall, right? So as an organization, if I go and I buy product X, product Y, product Z, and then every other product under the sun, if I don't have enough people to effectively man those tools, let alone leverage them to their greatest extent possible, what good are they to me, right? And to Carlos's point, it's like, you got to think about where you want this to go.
I can answer that question. That's easy. Whenever you're dealing with a lot of security managers, whenever they show progress to executives, people and training is not something that's quantifiable very easily, unless you actually need those particular skill sets. Whenever you're trying to communicate with executive management and you say, well, yeah, we got this tool implemented and it just means the blinky lights are on, then management can look at an Excel spreadsheet and say, yeah, 100% implemented. Good job, guys. That's the value it's providing to a lot of organizations.
So that reminds me, John, to your point, I just picked up a really great book on the recommendation of a friend of mine from Amazon who recommended a book called How to Measure Anything. And it talks about not only like...
With a ruler.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So,
really short book. Game over. 5-star review. Sorry.
would buy again. So it's got really like necessity of finding good measurement, but then
I think John's going to get his ruler.
I was gonna say like something's going on in the background, and I don't want to know necessarily, but
yeah, there was a lot of rubbing on the microphone, I think.
Indeed,
he's measuring something.
Hands up. I was going to the studio. I didn't want to troubleshoot it, so I jumped out to get to a place where I have a power adapter, which is coincidentally our kitchen.
There you go. I'm curious now to know where that Black Hills InfoSec like sign was in the house. But anyway, regardless.
Oh, no, I can answer that. It's actually in an old. Okay, so this place is a flower shop, or was a flower shop, and our studio is actually the former cooler at the flower shop, and you can see that we have like windows to get into the cooler. And we also have this fantastic big glass thing that you probably can't see in the dark, where they store flowers and reach in and grab them. So that's where the studio is in our offices. And that's more information than you ever wanted to know.
I was going to say, suddenly we know about John's flower shop.
There you go.
Perfect
Still
for
smells like
is.
Yeah, exactly.
So, in all seriousness, I think that what that gets to Carlos and to John's point, as well as the Carlos from training and John's point on like effective measurement, is managers haven't figured out the right measurements to take to determine the effectiveness of the trainings that they're having their people do or the skill sets that their people are building, right? That's not a problem of the fact that it can't be measured. It's that they haven't asked the right questions to actually measure it. So we need Michael Santarcangelo in here somewhere so that he can start asking some better questions about this.
The
question is
that's
simple.
something that I actually. Am I muted? No. Okay.
Oh no! Go ahead, Carlos.
Things that I actually covered in my presentation about 2 years ago at DerbyCon when I talk about purple teaming. One of the biggest problems that you will see in organizations is the way that you actually are measuring your red team and your blue team. Many times it is, hey, red, you get in, you win, bad blue team. Hey, blue team, you block red. Oh, good blue team, bad red team. What you have just created, adversarial behavior between both of them. Now they're adversaries. They're not working together. They're not sharing information. Red's not opening their kimono and sharing all of their techniques with the blue team. Blue team's not working with red in terms of developing new ways of detecting stuff, coming up with new projects. They're not even storyboarding stuff. They're not doing tabletop exercises because now they're adversaries. And that comes like, what is our goal? Where do we want to go? You need that what? What do we want to achieve? Why do we want to achieve it? Once you have the what and why, you can then sit down, and now that you have that picture, you can go, okay, if we want to get here, and this is why we want to get here, because that will let you know how much you're willing to invest. Now you can go and start breaking everything down of this is how we want to do it. This is how we should initially measure this to be able to get here. And then you have to have a hot wash, an after action, some type of review, call it whatever you want, where you come back and you say, okay, the way that we have been reviewing this, does it make sense? Did we got some benefit from it? Should we improve upon it? Should we change it?
Yep.
And the proverbial show me how it's measured and I'll show you how it's made, right?
Oh, yeah. Or how people behave. I tell that a lot about salespeople. People are going, oh, no, I hate salespeople. They're awful. I'm going like, well, when you're measured by how much money you bring in, not what type of product, not if the customer's happy, not if it was the right solution, just how much money you will bring in. And that depends on and that your family's welfare will depend on that. I'll tell you how you'll behave. The sales guy will do whatever it takes to make that sale. So don't hate them that much. It is just how they're measured. Yeah. It is how they'll behave.
Yeah, it's their job. It's their job, right? I mean, they're just fulfilling their purpose, and that's what they're paid to do, and they're going to do what they're going to do. Right?
And that's an example. The way you measure people dictates their behavior completely, because that's the carrot that you're putting in front of them. This is how am I going to measure you? And if you stray from that line, this is the stick that I'm going to hit you with. So they're going to stay in line and try to work to that goal that you set them up to.
And you can tell that Carlos has been managing a team, because I deal with the same thing all the time too. But a lot of what we do at BHIS is very wishy-washy. How do you actually rate the overall skill of various testers and things like that? And that's something we wrestle with all the time, and we decided just to ignore it completely, I guess. But so I get back to, okay, so this gets on a touchy subject since we're kind of meandering all over the place. So how the hell do you actually score and rate your employees then? If you're a manager of a security team, none of us are managers of security teams. We're managers of consulting firms and different firms that do assessments and vulnerability analysis plug-in teams. Okay, so how do we recommend that these managers actually go about and actually manage the skill sets of their team members then?
As I mentioned, you need a what and why. You have different blue teams. You have different.
If you're a blue team manager, Carlos, hold your feet to the fire. If you're a blue team manager, your first day, what are you going to start implementing to try to stack up and identify who are your top performers / senior people to the people that are junior level interns, and kind of start sorting them out? Because you know as well as I do that you can't base that on degree. You can't necessarily base that on certification. You can't base that on the length of someone's beard. So how do we actually go about trying to establish that type of metrics for kind of tracking where people are?
First things first is how is the total? First, I'll go from the higher up, and then I'll go into the macro, from the strategic down to the tactical. First, how is the entire team being measured right now, currently? Okay, these are the metrics. Then what I'll do is I'll do one-on-ones with each member of the team after I have that big team meeting. Okay, this is how everybody measured. Hey, everybody, how do you feel? How is everything being done? I go to the my higher ups. How do you feel? Where should they be? Where do you think things are failing? Because probably my higher ups do not know how to do it. Probably they have, but I need that view of how things are being perceived. How much support do we have and stuff? I need to get that footing, and then I can go one by one, interview each people, and then start getting a feel for all of them before I actually start making changes. It is something that is going to take time. It's going to have to be gradual, and it will change per environment and per group, because sometimes you may even have to move people around depending on their personality. You have your 8 type personalities that are very competitive, that are the first guys that get the job done, but they say, I don't want to work with so-and-so, or I cannot work with so-and-so. And at the moment that you have somebody that tells you twice that he cannot work with somebody else, now you have kind of a problem with people that you need to figure out how you're going to manage, and you get to set expectations and measure that kind of behavior and that type of people differently, and you have to shift people around and kind of do those reorgs.
But everything that you just said, and I don't disagree with anything you said, because I would do the exact same thing, but everything you said hinged on one very important thing. You said I would sit down and have like an interview with all the people. Now, you've been doing this long enough, I've been doing this long enough, that we can sit down and we can sniff out whether somebody's an ITsec wizard or if they're just getting started, and we can do that probably in a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah, I might also add to that, John, that they may think they're a wizard and they're just there riding someone's coattails.
Exactly.
Or skating along.
That's the delusion thing. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm going to get emails after the
what
show.
They actually have done.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get. Oh, okay. Now that gets a little bit more interesting. I like that a lot. But if you're a manager that's not Carlos, if you're a manager that's not Larry, if you're a manager that is somebody that's like, I'm now in charge of an IT security team.
Poof, you're a manager.
You're now poof, the magical dust hits you, and you have to now figure out what's going on. I think it gets a lot more difficult. There's really a poor systems of assessments for trying to identify the skill sets of people beyond certifications and degrees.
Well, and I want to throw in another thing, John. I think it goes beyond what you guys were just talking about, because everybody has a personal life as well, and any one team member's performance is going to vary based on their personal life that's going on. So it's never cut and dried, right? There may be some health issues, there may be some other personal issues going on. There's all sorts of variables that go into it.
Now, one clear way for you to measure the health is how structured are their operations and what are the processes that they have in place, and do they follow them? And one thing is to go in and say, oh, we have all of these SOPs written here. This is how we follow them. Another thing is for you to go to everybody and say, I want to be in those meetings and I want to see you guys executing. I'm just going to sit back, listen to you. And you're going to start looking at those SOPs, and you're going to go like, are you following your SOPs? Do you have SOPs? Is everybody informed of what are the SOPs? Is everybody informed on the mission?
More importantly, Carlos, you don't tell them you want to be in those meetings. You just show up.
You just show up.
Because if they know you want to be in the meetings, they're going to do it the right way.
I work with remote people, so in my case, I have to be invited to those to those calls.
So I think getting a little bit more high level, but it's something that's important to think about in regards to this is you can measure the impact of an individual based on a few things. And to Carlos's point as well is you have the ability to measure someone on their adherence to SOPs. And then you have the ability to measure someone at the next level that can write SOPs. And then you have adherence to the next level of someone that can explain the SOPs to someone outside of their group or to a new person, right? Like that's how you can measure the scale or the growth of an individual, not only on their ability to understand and comprehend, but their ability to now add value to and expand upon by sharing that value with others in an effective way. On Application Security Weekly a couple of weeks ago, we talked specifically about the 100x engineer, which is taking that knowledge that you have as an engineer and scaling it in a way that's effective for a team and an organization. It's documenting your processes, and then it's updating those processes, and then it's explaining those processes. So there's a number of things that you can do that aren't even related to security that can still measure the effectiveness of a person and how good they are at their job.
Wow, we went from measuring critical security controls to measuring people, which may also be a critical security control, I might add.
It is.
Hey, Larry, you need to reel this shit back in.
Yeah.
What do I look like, Paul? What do I look like, Paul?
I'll help Larry with reeling this shit in. I've got to get running, everybody. Everybody have a great evening. It was good talking with all of you.
Same here.
Bye, John.
Thanks, John.
All right, bye-bye, John.
Well, that was fun. John. He's still sort of there. No, John, we love you. And
it's been months since I've spoken with John.
It was a long, rambling conversation, but I think we talked about a lot of important things, even though we may have gone off topic. But ultimately, it all became about measurement of IT security controls in some way, shape, or form. And Carlos has clearly had a gap in his IT security controls.
Yeah, it's a small 4-year-old gap here.
It's okay. They're allowed.
Destroying some of my fix-it parts.
No. Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, so Larry, what do we got for security news, my friend?
Well, you know what? Let's have the gentleman cut to the next segment, and we'll see you right back here.